The Koran and Hadith were never meant for non-Muslims to read.
Mein Kampf, Preface. With this work I do not address myself to strangers, but to those adherents of the movement who belong to it with their hearts and whose reason now seeks a more intimate enlightenment.
Muhammad ordered Muslims not to take the Koran with them when they conquered new lands.
Bukhari. Allah's apostle forbade the people to travel to a hostile country carrying copies of the Koran.
He said,
"Unbelievers will never understand our signs and revelations."
Muhammad also claimed that nothing should be written if it could be spoken. He believed that eloquent speech had been the magic that had enabled his destiny. His Koran was, after all, an oral recital. The Hadith remains nothing more than an oral report. Hitler tells us why.
Mein Kampf, Preface. I know that one is able to win people far more by the spoken word than by the written word. Every great movement on this globe owes its rise to great speakers and not to writers.
Muslims and Nazis alike report that men swooned in the founder's presence, as he so passionately called them to his cause. But I must say in Hitler's defense, he was a much more coherent writer than was Allah. But alas.
Mein Kampf, Preface. Nevertheless, the basic elements of a doctrine must be set down in permanent form in order that it may be represented in the same way and in unity.
In other words, I want my prophetic words to survive me, and that's because both men wanted to outlive those who tormented, mocked, and rejected them.
Mein Kampf, Preface. Mein Kampf will serve to destroy the evil legends created about my person by the Jewish press.
Mohammad and Hitler saw themselves and their followers as a nation in distress, one that could, should, and would righteously steal what belonged to others. Hitler said,
Mein Kampf. The distress of the nation gives us the moral right to acquire foreign soil and territory. The sword is then the plow. From the tears of war there grows the daily bread for generations to come.
Muhammad said,
Quran 13:41. Do they not see us advancing from all sides into the land of the disbelievers, reducing its borders by giving it to believers in war victories?
Inspiring militants to become plundering pirates, both religiotecs turned their adherents into parasites. Their economies became dependent upon booty. Honest labor was confined to fighting.
Mein Kampf, Preface. That also gave me the opportunity to describe my own development as far as it is necessary to understand these volumes.
The Quran screams out to us today, testifying that Muhammad was an abused child, hating all who withheld the power and wealth he craved. Mein Kampf is more direct. Hitler admits to being abused, to being orphaned, and to being poor. He tells us how this led him to create his new religion, and how he would use it to attack both his powerful peers and the defenseless Jews. As such, reading Mein Kampf is like having a conversation with Muhammad. Hitler and Mohammad rose from tiny towns they ultimately attacked.
Mein Kampf. Today I consider it my good fortune that fate designated the small town of Brno as the place of my birth.
Der Fuhrer called his guiding spirit fate and nature. Both were always capitalized as if divine, and used interchangeably with Lord and God. These words are found throughout English translations of the Bible and Koran. Both have pagan origins. Lord was the title of Baal, the Canaanite god. The English god is derived from the German Gott. Pagan Aryans coined the term in reference to the dark spirits they worshipped. Satan would be honored with either moniker. Like Muhammad, Hitler was orphaned and abused. He described his youth in these terms.
Mein Kampf 6. Endless poverty, misery and hardship, want and sorrow. 7. I was a quarrelsome boy. 29. Hunger was my faithful guard, the only friend who never left me. 33. I have felt poverty's grip, a murderous viper with poisonous fangs. 32. The relentless struggle killed all pity. My painful existence suffocated any feeling of sympathy.
Remember these words. Hitler described his torment.
Mein Kampf 43. I was familiar with nothing but filth and despised all authority. 39. What grew out of this unhappiness and misery, of this filth and decay, was no longer a human being. I possessed a ruthless resolution to destroy the incurable social tumors.
I believe that this is how Mohammed felt as he endured the anguish of poverty and the unrelenting harshness of the Arabian desert. He came to despise all authority except his own. Understanding Hitler's motivation is important because ultimately the two most diabolical doctrines ever conceived by man were the direct result of an abused childhood. A festering rage caused both founders to covet what they were denied and to hate those they viewed as responsible for their torment. Speaking of his abusive father, Hitler said,
Mein Kampf 14. The old man became embittered. I got the worst of it as he relentlessly began to enforce his authority. 38. He became familiar with alcohol, coming home drunk and brutal. God have mercy on the scenes which followed. I witnessed it all personally, hundreds of times, with disgust and indignation. Even now I shudder when I think of those pitiful times. The pictures are haunting, but fate will take its revenge.
Hitler, like Mohammed, was fatalistic. Der Fuhrer named his guiding spirit Fate, while the prophet usurped every characteristic of Manat, the Arab goddess of fate. Both believed that their God would help them avenge their tormented youth. They preached predestination because it eliminates choice. Being abandoned shaped the boys who would become tyrants.
Mein Kampf 24. When I was 13, my father died quite suddenly. 25. 2 years later, my mother's death put a sudden end to all my plans. Her illness exhausted our meager funds. The orphan's pension I received was not nearly enough for me to live on. I hoped to wrest from fate some success. I needed to become something.
This was Mohammed's motivation. It resonates throughout the Koran and Hadith. He was insecure and needed to prove that he was somebody. Although his behavior was criminal and immoral, Der Fuhrer, like Der Prophet, saw himself as a bastion of virtue.
Mein Kampf 41. I was shocked by the ethical and moral crudity of my comrades, and by their low level of spiritual development. 41. Not a shred of humanity is left. Not a single institution is unattacked. From teacher to head of state, from religion to morality, everything is abused, pulled down in the nastiest manner into filth and depravity.
Mohammed saw Arabs as either good fighters in his cause, useless hypocrites, or as enemy infidels. Hitler's view was no different.
Mein Kampf 16. I saw the world in three groups: the fighters, the lukewarm, and the traitors.
Both doctrines were uncompromising, intolerant, born in blood and propelled by sword. The means to Hitler's madness was his corruption of history and his wanton disregard for facts and chronology. This was identical to Mohammed's dim-witted rape of the Bible.
Mein Kampf 18. I learned how to forecast the future by recalling the past. The chronology of history does not matter. It is the search for forces which cause effects. Remember that which is important and forget the rest.
The Aryan dictator twisted the past to serve his future, just like the Arab pirate before him.
Mein Kampf 47. Content is registered in the mind, not according to the sequence it happened or the sequence in which the books were read, but just as small pieces of a mosaic that must be put into place.
While Mohammed wasn't this articulate or philosophical, he did have a penchant for taking unrelated pieces of Jewish history and rearranging them to his liking.